Hello everyone and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces Talks Music. Today we are going to be talking about the classic progressive rock album In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. This is an incredible album that I actually discovered later in my life. I didn't grow up with this one. It was not in my circle, and I don't know why that was. I don't know if this is a harder album to get a hold of or what happened, but I mean, bands like The Who and the Rolling Stones and Pink Floyd were easy to find. This stuff was a little bit harder. This is considered a classic of progressive rock on Rolling Stone's top 100 progressive rock albums. This is number 2, only behind Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon. It was hugely influential on prog rock. Many of the bands that are considered prog rock greats were absolutely inspired by this record. And this band is really interesting. They formed in 1968 and played a few concerts, and there's a little bit of historical problems of accuracy when looking at when their first concert was. But they did play opening for the Rolling Stones in Hyde Park, I believe, in June of '69, before this album came out, and the audience were completely blown away by this record. Really, truly, just mind-blowing stuff they were doing on stage, and you can find all kinds of write-ups about this band from people that were there at that concert. Absolutely incredible. Really quickly, the album cover is iconic. So this album art was drawn by Barry Godber. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, who was a computer programmer. This is the only album cover he ever did, and he died soon after the album's release, which is unfortunate because he probably would have gone on to do a lot more iconic cover pieces after this one. And now apparently Fripp owns this, is the one that owns this original painting that he did. The personnel on this album, the most famous is of course Greg Lake, who did lead vocals, bass guitar, and production. We're going to talk about his ability to play bass and sing in a bit. Robert Fripp, of course, he kind of is the mainstay of King Crimson. All King Crimson albums after have had Robert Fripp in them. He's the main King Crimson guy. He did electric and acoustic guitars and production. They originally had a producer for this record, but it didn't work out, so the label let them produce it themselves, which is pretty insane considering this was their first album. They didn't really have a following at this point at all. Ian MacDonald did saxophone, flute, clarinet, bass clarinet, and mellotron, harpsichord, piano, organ, vibraphone, backing vocals, co-lead vocals on I Talk to the Wind, and of course he helped produce the album. Michael Giles did drums, percussion, backing vocals, and production. His incredible drumming we'll talk about in a bit. And Peter Sinfield, who was the friend of the guy that did the front cover of this, did lyrics, illumination, and production. Don't know what illumination was, but his lyrics are fantastic, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go on. The first time I heard this record was just a random, I think it was probably 2000, somewhere like 2007, 2008. And I just always loved to read or watch whatever I could about prog rock. And somehow this came up as an overlooked prog rock album, which I don't think it is anymore. And I put it in and listened to the first track, which is called 21st Century Schizoid Man. And had to check the date over and over again to make sure I was listening to something from 1969, because this was so heavy and so unique and so wild, the way those vocals sound. are just incredible. And this track seems to look to the future, of course, 21st century schizoid man, and kind of what the future would be like both musically and for living. And here we see Sinfield's great lyrics right out of the gate. But for me, I was like, okay, this is the heaviest thing I have heard from music up to this point. This seems like the most heavy metal and the earliest heavy metal, and one could argue Helter Skelter, and that would be a good argument. But there was just a rough, hard metal edge to this song that blew my mind. And I'm just going to go track by track here for a bit, and talk about each of these while I go, since I've already started into it. The middle of this track, so it's verse, chorus, with an instrumental breakdown in the middle of 21st Century Schizoid Man. And when I first heard the record, I was not a huge fan of this middle part. I felt like the insanely talented musicians were just noodling here. And I am going to level this critique at another part of a song later, but in this one, I think I finally got it, in the sense that every time I listen to this middle part, I finally was like, God, this is just schizoid. And then suddenly, of course, it all made sense. 21st Century Schizoid Man. The middle of this song is an instrumental breakdown of what the schizoidness of future people, us, from King Crimson's perspective, would look like. And the artisticness of that made me enjoy the middle part a lot more. Also, and I'm going to say this a lot throughout this, these musicians are a level of talent rarely heard on popular records. I mean, Greg Lake and Michael Giles are one of the best rhythm sections I've heard in prog rock. I know that prog rock prides itself on having incredible musicians, and so that's just kind of being repetitive. Of course, Rush and Yes and all these other bands are renowned for how good their rhythm sections are, but this one is really incredible. This one really calls to me. It's jazzy. It's got a jazz fusion thing going on, which isn't my favorite direction to go, but it's done so well. It's really just worth a listen to sense the rhythm. Listen to the rhythm changes and the constant runs on the bass and the drums, the complex, it's incredible. It's really incredible. And the first time I heard it, it sounded like nonsense. It really did. So I had to listen in quite a few times. For a long time, this was the best track on the album for me. And I would play it for people just to watch their shock and awe at the fact that this was released in 1969. Absolutely incredible sound. I'm surprised it's not used in more movies. This is just so catchy. And maybe it's just that they wouldn't allow it, which probably could be the case. But yeah, absolutely incredible song. And right after it is the track I Talk to the Wind, which is the most opposite you can get on this record. This is a soft tune that was apparently written for a band that existed before King Crimson, that had many of the same people in it. And they included this on the record because they wanted to show that their soft side as well. And this is a very soft and beautiful song. Apparently it was inspired by Joni Mitchell. And I can see that in the song. Here we get to see a lot of McDonald's flute, and even his bass clarinet was really beautiful in this, and it's got layers. It's a very symphonic tune. I really enjoy this one. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Um, the use of Fripp's harmonics on his guitar is really incredible in this, if I'm understanding what instrument is being used to create these kind of bell sounds throughout the song. It's really beautiful, really well done, and one that I find they didn't wander on too much. This is a pretty straightforward tune, and I really like it for that. It is not one of the big three for me on this record, but it's not a bad tune by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a little bit more run of the mill than the big three on this record, and we'll go over the big three, of course, as we go on. In fact, the next one is one of the big three, and that is the track Epitaph. I love this song. The lyrics are filled with this kind of terrifying concept of what it means to face death. Really beautifully done. The music is incredible. The mellotron really shines here. I consider this kind of a twin to In the Court of the Crimson King. These two songs really have a similar feel to me, and I really like them for that. And I think you could start with this tune, or 21st Century Schizoid Man, or In the Court of the Crimson King. Any of these three tunes you could start with and be really hooked on this band. Absolutely incredible stuff. The mellotron in this is so layered and so beautiful. And interesting bit of trivia, and I think this is correct. It's been a little while since I've watched the Genesis interviews, but this specific mellotron was eventually sold to Genesis. So the mellotron you hear on early Genesis records is the same mellotron you're hearing in this album. Of course, this time played by Tony Banks. Very, very cool. Kind of knowing that this instrument has been the mellotron in so many of the great prog classic bands. Very cool. But yeah, the mellotron layers in this are incredible. And McDonald was probably, or apparently, so insane about wanting layer after layer of mellotrons that some of these tapes would go 5 generations of bouncing in order to get more and more layers, and it really shows in this one, and also in in all the whole album, really, because it's either symphonic where he's layering flutes and clarinets, or it's layering all these mellotron lines. It's really incredible, and this is very complex music because of that. Next we go to Moonchild, which I really like. The beginning of the first half of it is absolutely incredible. It's mythic. The lyrics describe this moonchild waiting for the sunchild, and it feels like myth making, which I always really enjoy. I enjoy that in what I read, and I enjoy that in the music as well. Again, I think of Genesis with White Mountain, which is a song that makes a myth, in my opinion, and it's one of my favorites of all time from that band. I love songs that create myth, and I feel like the lyrics to this song do that. They're myth making. It's very understated. It's even in slow, soft, the soft side of King Crimson, this is the softest. It has a song structure at the beginning, then the last half is just guitar and sounds, and sometimes those sounds will make you feel a little floaty at the end, but for me, this is a moment on this album that really drags. I have a hard time. I often skip this. I've forced myself to listen to it quite a few times before making this video, and I've forced myself to listen to it in the past. And I can't really, unlike the Schizoid section in 21st Century Schizoid Man, I can't find a meaning that allows me to enjoy it, and it doesn't have the incredible rhythm section in this part, it just sounds like noodling to me. The only way I could describe it artistically is that the noodling is playful, and that they might be attempting to show these mythic moon and sun gods or myths playing together. But even then, I find it kind of hard to listen to, and I feel like it's a sudden drag on this record, which is unfortunate because this record really has not dragged up until this point. So it's probably my least favorite song on the album, however, and it's the beginning of side 2. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that. Side 1 ends with Epitaph, and then side 2 opens with Moonchild. But that being said, the first half is great. I love the first half of the song. It's just that noodling part. It would be great if they would have worked more on the instrumental, and I hate to say that because this is probably very complex to play. I doubt this was easy to produce, this noodling section. It might not even be noodling. It might be very well thought out music that sounds like noodling. But yeah, I would have preferred maybe a more layered ending or another little tune there or something. But we end with what is probably now my favorite track after listening to this album quite a bit, and that's In the Court of the Crimson King, which is another Mellotron layered, and I want to say lyrically this is a fantasy tune, really incredible, kind of evil sounding, just great song. There's a fire witch, and there's the court of the Crimson King, where all this kind of craziness is going on. I would not be surprised if Stephen King was not inspired by this record for his own Crimson King in his... I know it's the Crimson King's in Insomnia, and maybe the Dark Tower series as well. I believe it is. It's been a long time since I've read all that, but yeah, this is a dark fantasy, scary song with incredible layers and layers of Mellotron that just make it absolutely stunning. And I would say the best on this album is the first track and the last track, with Epitaph being in the middle. Insanely good. And that's it. 5 tracks on just a hugely inspirational, technically incredible album. Really, really wonderful piece of musical art. Just incredible. Unfortunately, the band fell apart after this. I think McDonald and Giles, I can't remember. Anyway, people left, and then after that, of course, Greg Lake went with Emerson and Palmer and formed Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and King Crimson, who were slated to be absolutely massive, were suddenly gone, and of course Fripp kept it alive, and the next 2 albums were transitional until they became the King Crimson of the mid to late 70s. That is beloved. I don't know if anything ever topped this. I know it didn't in the charts. But anyway, this is, I don't know what they call this. This is a 3 CD version that I got, and I absolutely love it. Plus it comes with a Blu-ray disc that has the album in surround sound, which is the way I listen to it all the time because it is incredible. So if you're going to get a copy of this, this is what I recommend. It's got 2 fold-outs here. Of course, that one. This is a replica of the record. And there's 2 discs in that one. And then over here we have the master tapes. I like when bands put pictures of the master tapes in. And this has the Blu-ray and another disc in it with lots of outtakes, alternate versions, and of some live shows. I think there's a live show on this. Plus the 5.1 surround sound. Absolutely incredible. Now I'm wondering if there is a live show on this, and I don't know if there is. It comes with a very thick book with lots of absolutely cool information about the making of this record. So the first disc is the album, and then an instrumental version of the album. They're all mixed by Steve Wilson from the original master tapes. CD2 is the alternate album, expanded edition, mixed by Steve Wilson. And then the third disc, is the original master, expanded. So yeah, there's no live. There is that alternate record. And then, yeah, there's some alternates at the end of each one of these records. Very, very cool. I know that there are YouTube videos, or a YouTube video that you can find of them playing live in this era. And I think there's a couple maybe bootlegs, but I know that live recordings from this era are very hard to find, and none of them sound great, unfortunately. Not because the band isn't great. The band is mind-blowing, but the quality of the recordings aren't great, which is unfortunate. So, if you have not heard this classic album, I highly recommend you give it a listen. It is one of the first steps in prog rock, and it's absolutely incredible from start to finish. All right, if you watched this to the end, thank you very much. If you liked it, please click like. And if you like this kind of content, please click subscribe, because we'll be making a lot more of it in the future. Thank you so much for watching.